In November 2023, I discovered an incredible ancient place that virtually nobody had heard about. From that online article, I decided to create a short video, which went viral almost immediately. Everybody was fascinated with what appeared to be a floating door in the middle of a flat-top mountain. It looked like a strange mixture of a man-made structure and a natural formation, and the mystery surrounding its purpose got everybody intrigued. Armed with very little information, I began a meticulous search for this elusive ancient fortress. Rumored to be located somewhere in China, it had been referred to by various names such as Longmen Fortress, Wiezhaung Village Castle, and there were even people referring to this as a Nephilim Hideout. My research revealed that while this fortress is indeed in Hejin City in Shanxi Province, it surprisingly did not seem to have an official name, and so I decided to call it the Hejin City Fortress. I wrote an article, put out a video, and then just as quick as it had arrived, the YouTube algorithm decided it had shown it enough times. But my fascination with this site did not stop there. I felt almost like an archaeologist discovering something for the very first time, and could not stop thinking about it. What was its purpose? Why was there very little information out there about it? Was the information that I did find true? Months had passed, and I found yet another fascinating and undocumented place in China called the Wiezhaung Cliff Tombs. And this got me wondering, just how many more ancient sites existed which had not been documented or studied. I took to a site called Upwork, where you can hire freelancers for various tasks. I had used the site before and hired people for digital work, but I wasn't sure if it was actually possible to hire somebody to visit an ancient place in the middle of nowhere. But I thought I'd try anyway. Once I'd posted the job, I got a message from a guy called Wiezhaung, who was interested in visiting some of the places I had been curious about. We negotiated a price, and I hired him on the spot. We began documenting some really cool sites, and I've been posting some videos of those on my channel. A lot of my subscribers started making comments about the Chinese Communist Party withholding information on Chinese history, and whilst I have seen some news stories out there saying the same thing, I wasn't entirely sure if that was true for the Hejin City Fortress. Could it be the case that they were not even aware of it? It would certainly explain the lack of information. I spoke with Wiezhaung and asked him if he could get a drone and go to Hejin City and search for the fortress. I had previously found its coordinates on Google Earth, but it looked super difficult to reach. Wiezhaung, however, was up for the challenge, but just had to buy a drone first. After planning the route, he set off on the journey by train, traveling a staggering 550 kilometers to reach Hejin City. When he finally got there on the 3rd of May, things did not exactly go according to plan. To reach the fortress, he had to travel by motorcycle. It had rained the night before, and the muddy and wet terrain was proving difficult to navigate. On top of that, the slope leading up to Hejin City Fortress had also collapsed. In the end, Wiezhaung had to abandon the motorcycle, realizing he wasn't going to get any further this way. By chance, he met a local man who offered to take him to the fortress for a fee of 100 yuan. He said there was a different route to get there, and only he knew that path. On the way up, the local man told Wiezhaung that the fortress was used to prevent bandits in an old society. There was only one small entrance at the front. He said that if a bandit was to come up to the entrance, he could be beaten back down again. The tactic of fortifying a location with limited entrances to make it difficult for the enemy to penetrate is known as creating a choke point, or bottleneck, so it certainly made sense. As well as this, the man who led Wiezhaung up to the fortress was a different person to Hu Juni, the man featured in the original article I read online. And interestingly, both of their stories matched. Since the original video, there have been a few more articles and videos appear online, but no further information on the site itself. We have searched in Chinese and English, and extensively and exhaustively gone down the Hejin City rabbit hole, with no avail. It seems that no archaeologist has ever studied this place and no excavation work or research has ever been done. Wikipedia will not accept the article I had written on it for this exact reason, and so this ancient site, unfortunately, remains that way. However, from my research and Wiezhaung's visit, we can now start to piece together the mysterious puzzle of the Hejin City Fortress. So let's do a deeper dive and see what we can hypothesize from this ancient place. It seems that the area is geographically unique, with this being a very good spot to build a fortification. One of the reasons is that the landscape is demanding, and from a military perspective, this site would be very difficult to penetrate, and that is true for every angle. After the last video, a lot of you had asked what was inside, and since the previous footage I was able to obtain didn't show that, We were able to find out this time. The lowest slope was indeed difficult to climb towards the entrance, and when inside it was even harder to get to the top. This agrees with the choke point idea of the one entrance. The climb was challenging, and that was for one person without any resistance. I can imagine with a weapon and armor, it would be even harder, let alone if you had a group of people beating you back down again. When I read the original article, it mentioned about wooden boards being used to reach the fortress. Those wooden boards would have definitely made this climb up a lot easier. It seems the original footage was taken a while ago and possibly in winter, or perhaps even during a drought, because we find the site now with much more vegetation and overgrown. We do, however, see that the land around the site is being farmed, so it could be possible that the locals take care of it in some way. Originally, this was difficult to see, but there does appear to be a second way in or out of the fortress. It's been victim to the erosion of time, but you can see an archway still present. Partially blocking the second entrance appears to be a large boulder. Perhaps this was moved in and out of place, depending on if the fort was under attack or not. Below there is a pretty treacherous drop though, so perhaps this could have been an emergency escape route of some kind, or even another route in, which required wooden boards, the ones that the locals had spoken about. With the wooden boards being placed along the side of the fortress, rather than leading up to the front entrance, this would indeed make this a valid entry point. Referring back to the original article again, we were told of cave dwellings here. Ones that, under the threat of attack, could house the local population and their livestock for days. We did find evidence for this also, with several holes dotted around the structure, a lot more than we had originally seen from the drone footage in November 2023. The roof of the structure does look like it was worked, to ensure it was flat, and we can compare that to the land around it, which also has similar features. Lowest soils are among the most fertile in the world, and so it makes sense why the land is being used for farming. The top of this ancient fortress could have fulfilled the same function, or it could have been planted with shrubs and vegetation, further disguising the structure, helping it to blend into the natural landscape. From the perspective of a fortress without anything growing on the top, there would be some benefit to doing this also, allowing the people to move quickly under threat of attack, enabling the residents to use carts with wheels, transporting food and supplies easier. From the air we could see lines in the roof. These seem to be dividing it in some way, suggesting the roof had separate areas or functions. The original article mentioned a bastion of some kind, stating that it was too difficult to see from afar. With the drone footage, we were able to see if this was true or not. It is indeed not clear from most of the angles we shot, but from this particular one, you can see the rock is different to the formations further in the distance. It does appear as if the rock has been worked, with a steep drop from the top, eventually smoothing back out again into the natural landscape. Then there appears to be a second wall, which does exactly the same thing. The second part looks like it's been subjected to a lot more erosion and collapse over time, with the first wall having straighter lines and grooves underneath it. Both of these obstacles would perform well as a fortress wall, stopping bandits from walking up the slope and straight to the top, where the people were hiding. The age of the fortress is something which still remains a mystery. However, there are a couple of methods we can use to try and narrow down how old the Hejin Fortress could be. Let's look at what evidence we do have. If this place is indeed a fortress, as it appears to be, we can look at the history records of fortifications. They were first used in China around 8,000 years ago, but became common practice by the time of the Zhou dynasty around 3,000 years ago. There are bricks at the front entrance. When referring to historical records, we can see there is evidence fired bricks have been used in China, as far back as 5,500 years ago. But these bricks look primitive in comparison to the ones used here. It's hard to tell if the bricks were a standard size that were cut, or if they were made in irregular sizes. However, it does appear that some gray bricks have been used. There is mention of gray bricks used in China, dating back to the Ming dynasty, who ruled between 1368 AD to 1644 AD. In my opinion, the doorway looks similar to those used on medieval castles, so the date of the Ming dynasty would make sense. If there are any brickologists who could share their opinion on this, I would be super grateful. In the original article, we were told that the locals would run and hide from what were described as Japanese devils. Bandits were also mentioned. During the Ming dynasty in China, particularly in the 16th century, Japanese pirates called the wokou would often raid coastal towns and villages in both China and Korea. But Hejin City is nowhere near the coast. The term Japanese devils was popularized in China during the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945. This was a derogatory term that was used to refer to Japanese soldiers and nationals, due to the atrocities committed by Japanese forces during the war. It could well be the case that the local man who described them had adopted that term from his parents, and that is how they were described when looking back over time. The truth of the matter is, we won't know how old this place is until it's studied properly, and this is all circumstantial evidence. But given what we do know, I think it's likely this place dates back to medieval times. But even if that were true, there is nothing to say that the doorway bricks weren't added later, and the site was repurposed from an even earlier time. But I still wonder what is in those caves. Could there be artifacts or remains there? Perhaps evidence of grains and pottery? Can somebody get Flint dribble a plane ticket, please? Over the next couple of weeks, I will continue to study the footage and look at what other mysteries the Hejin City Fortress has to offer. But for now, it still leaves us with many unanswered questions. Was this ancient site the fortress I had fondly named it at the beginning of this journey? Or was this incredible place something more than that? What do you think?